Last week, I had a very interesting conversation with one of my, I guess she would be my aunt. She married my uncle, and her name is Allie. But that's not her birth name. Her birth name is Unju, and she is from South Korea. We discussed the differences between the United States and South Korea's views on public speaking. What I learned is that South Korea, while more rigid socially structured, it's very unusual for people to challenge people in authority, is very similar actually to United States' view on public speaking. According to clearlycultural.com, South Korea has a PDI, or public distance index, of 60 as compared to a 40 for the United States. Now, the higher the number on the PDI index, that means that people are less likely to challenge people in authority and believe that this is the proper way for it to be. The United States, being a 40, is right in the middle, and 60 is a little bit higher up, but not nearly as high up as the extreme distance structures like Arab countries and things like that. According to cultureatlas.com, eye contact is a big thing in South Korea, and reinforces this social structure in that prolonged eye contact with someone older or considered in a higher position than you can be considered rude. We're going to talk a little bit more on why people from South Korea choose to public speak, how they tend to deliver these public speaking engagements, and compare it to how the United States tends to public speak and why. So reasons for South Koreans to public speak. According to Unju, she said, "There are lots of free classes and lectures. Many office workers have dinner together after work so the boss can give a speech at the dinner." I found this very interesting due to the fact that I have never been invited, as an American, over to my boss's house for dinner after work so he can give me a lecture. I found that very interesting, but I could see how that could work. She also mentioned that it's very common for South Koreans to choose to public speak at demonstrations against the government. She mentioned that local, state, and federal governments all often have demonstrations against them, and that it's very, very common for people to use megaphones to give impromptu public speeches at these events rather than just yelling at the crowd. It's an actual public speaking event almost. She also mentioned that when they public speak, or how they public speak, is interesting in that they love PowerPoints. She said Koreans love PowerPoint, just love it. She said that they call them PPTs because that's the file name. Instead of calling them PowerPoints, they just abbreviate to PPTs, which I thought that's awesome. I feel like I'm going to adopt that and call them PPTs now. She also mentioned that they really love visual aids of all kinds. Pictures, videos, visual aids are the way to go. And in comparison to the United States, I found this interesting because I feel like why we speak here in the United States can be very, very similar. We often speak at political rallies. We public speak at demonstrations against, government. We do lectures and things like that. Our bosses do give lectures to us. It's just the context, I feel like, is often different in that here in the United States, we choose more to do those lectures at work on work time instead of doing them at your boss's house after a dinner. Or the political lectures tend to be more like the candidate lecturing the crowd rather than the crowd impromptu getting up and giving these public speaking lectures impromptu from themselves. I find that very interesting because that's not really as common here in the United States. When you do see that, it tends to be a very aggravating thing rather than a expressly logically thought out public speaking experience, I feel like. And also here in the United States, we love PowerPoints as well. Probably not to the extent that they love them, but we do really like our PowerPoints and our visual aids. It's just that I feel like here in the United States, it tends to be more of an entertainment thing to keep your crowd engaged, keep them listening to what you're saying. And it felt like, from what Anju was saying, in South Korea, it tends to be more of an informative thing. Like the PowerPoint is more like, here's a pie chart with all the statistics, or here's the information I'm trying to give you, rather than like, I need you to stay entertained, because the assumption is the crowd is there because you're an authority figure and they will listen to you anyway. The attention span is implied, I guess. So, in conclusion, the reasons that we public speak and how we public speak here in the United States versus South Korea, very, very similar, especially the core reasons why we public speak, I feel like, are very, very similar. It's just that it's a little bit more geared towards powerful people, like people in positions of power in South Korea, than it is here in the United States, in that it tends to be a more rigidly socially structured experience. Basically, I learned that we're really not all that different after all.